And
report
everybody's going
on
to be
our
like,
like,
oh, we
yeah,
finally have an Afghan
absolutely,
and a Muslim. Give
exactly.
all the stories. And
I
that
was
just doesn't
so,
happen.
yeah.
But that brings me to a whole other question, because we're talking about in our community nowadays quite a bit about how, and it's one of my rants all the time, is that we need to encourage our children to go into fields like journalism and get a formal education in that field. So when we report on our own stories, we are capable. We have the training to be able to do that effectively, and then we also have credibility where someone will listen to us because they believe we've got the right background. So, however, what you're saying is, well, if and when we succeed and they end up going to those schools, it may still not bring about the results that we're hoping that it will. So how do we circle that square, I guess is my question.
So I don't think it's impossible, and I don't think that I think if there's more, like again, like it was just me and one other Muslim student. There was three of us, but it was just me and one other Muslim student that was speaking up about this, right? Or try to get that sort of like recognition of what is right and what is wrong. Um, and I think if it's in the masses, it makes a huge difference, because at the like, in their perspective, they're also looking at me and this one other student. They're like, oh, they just want to cause trouble. You know what I mean? Like that's just what it is. And if we do encourage our kids to be able to go into these fields, then we're producing like bulk of like students who are going to be able there and be
Right.
able to do the same thing. However, it will take some time, because I know Muslims who are in the last year, especially in the last 2 years since October 7th. I've known so many journalists who have just left journalism because it's so hard to be in the inside and do a change when there's so little of us.
Okay.
I think it's definitely possible, but I think it needs to be it's a lot of groundwork. And I think anybody
Right.
who goes into the field, they kind of have to recognize and know that there's barriers to journalism in general if you are a journalist, but there are multiple more barriers as a person of color and as a Muslim that
Right.
exist
Okay.
because of the way the system is set up, unfortunately.
Right.
Yeah.
So let me drill down a little bit more into that. How crucial do you think is the formal education when it comes to journalism, or even in film, compared to hands-on experience or self-taught skills? So when we talk about that, we want to encourage our children to go into journalism or film school to get that formal education. How crucial is it really? Or can you take YouTube lessons or LinkedIn Learning and just kind of learn it on your own?
Yeah. So I will say, I think formal education for journalism is absolutely needed. I think it's absolutely needed. I will say that because there are so many different legal things that you learn through the formal education of journalism. Like journalism is actual live reporting on factual issues, whereas filmmaking, it could be fiction as well, right? So for journalism, I would say 100%. If you're trying to be a journalist, go to journalism school. There are so many things that you need to learn and you will learn. And I don't think you can do it without that sort of certification. With film, I think I didn't go to film school. I mean, I did go to journalism school, which I did learn the hands-on experience of how to use a camera, but I'm not the one using the camera. No, there's no way I'm a professional cinematographer, not even close. But I think it is helpful to go to film school. I don't want to bar film school entirely, because I personally do feel like if I knew that I wanted to do film and I went into film school, I'd be in a much better place. I think it's a great privilege to be in film school, but it's not needed.
That's really cool. So we now know if someone wants to become a journalist, it's very important for them to go to good journalism school and go through that path. And we know we need more people that need to go into that field. And we also know that when you do go, you're not always going to get the results that you're looking for, and it'll be very difficult to navigate your time while in that environment. So how do we bring those two things together? What support do our next generation require to be able to navigate those challenges? And are there any initiatives in place already that we may not be aware of that could possibly provide that support?
I haven't been in the journalism space for a couple of years now, but I know that
Mm-hmm.
there are groups now in Toronto specifically that journalists are coming together, especially like I've seen a couple of journalist groups that had emerged together. Like I think there's a group called Journalists for Palestine, I believe, that are doing sort of like I don't know if that's what they're actually called, but I know that I saw something that where journalists had come together some of the top journalists in global news, CBC, had come together to speak up on these sort of things. So, and call out the spaces. I think your most important thing is to have allies, and not just allies that are people of color, but even allies that are in positions of power and are white. It's important to have those sort of allies who are being actually listened to in those spaces, who will advocate for you just as much as you're advocating for yourself. When you're in school as a student, I would say that there is your course union. And I believe, at least at TMU, I don't know if they still have this position, but a friend of mine was advocating for this position at TMU, an old friend of mine, and she had created the position of equity and inclusion in the course union to ensure that these sort of issues are being accounted for. I'm not sure if that's still a thing at TMU or any other school, but I know that during my years at TMU and just generally during my years of school, I know those positions were being added everywhere, not just in the course union, but in our MSA. It was being added in our student unions. And I know those positions were emerging, and I think they still are out there from what I know. And being involved in those positions is what actually I think brings change. I think people don't understand how much change actually comes in from institutional universities and students that actually end up following through to actual workplaces. So I think that's what I would say. I wouldn't ever encourage anybody to give up. I think for me, it's just film ended up working a lot more easily, and I ended up going through something a little bit traumatic, but a little bit, and during my years of school at TMU, about specifically between Israel and the Israel-Palestine situation, which is why I stepped away from journalism. And I think a lot of people have, but I think it's not worth giving up for, because at the end of the day, Canadian Muslims are not going anywhere in Canada, and we need to be reported on factually and accurately. And I think it's on us to be able to do that, or call it out at least.